Hello, my friends. We're back from KISS Kruise XI. Welcome to episode 81 of the KISS Army Nation podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Pasquale Veri.
And I'm Claudio Spera. Welcome to the show, everyone.
On this special episode of the KISS Army Nation podcast, we'll be talking to keyboardist Tyson Leslie, who did a show-stopping performance on the ship called the Dueling Pianos and performed with Bruce Kulick and his incredible band. We'll talk a little bit about his career and do a quick review of KISS Kruise XI. KISS Army, please welcome Tyson Leslie. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good
to see you.
Same here. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Tyson.
That's quite a collection you got behind you, man. That's pretty
Thank
amazing.
You. Yeah. You should see busts.
I wore the wrong shirt today, man. Dang.
No, we should stay here.
But these guys were on the cruise last year, right?
That's right.
Liliac was?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. Tyson, as Pasco was saying, so your stage presence and passion for the music was so evident when you hit the stage with Bruce Kulick and his band.
Right.
Could you please give our listeners a little rundown of who you are, who Tyson is, and what are your musical inspirations?
Sure. Well, my name is Tyson Leslie. I basically spent most of my life in Kansas City, and then I ended up in Nashville in 2015. And that's when all of my life career started to take a change really, really quickly. And as far as like big artists, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, that you may have known that I played for, I've worked with all kinds of different people, from Corey Taylor from Slipknot. That was one of my first bigger gigs back in 2009 and 10. And then after that ended, I just started dueling pianos in Kansas City at a place called Howl at the Moon. That's kind of how I learned the craft of what you saw on the boat. And I did that for a few years until I moved to Nashville. And once I moved to Nashville, a few months after moving here, I was playing with a country music singer named Tracy Lawrence. And then when that ended, because I just realized that I wasn't great at playing 90s country music. You know, I like listening to it, but I'm not good at playing it. And then I went back to dueling pianos for a while, and then I got the call about a year later from a guy named Tony Higbee from Tom Kiefer's band, and he asked me if I'd be interested in playing in the band Vixen, playing keyboards for them and being a tour manager for them, which of course the answer was yes. And so a couple months later, I flew down to Florida, and me and the guitar player Britt both auditioned for Vixen at the same time. We got the gig in 2017, in February 2017, and we've been there ever since. And that kind of spiraled into all kinds of other different things. I met Brent, actually both Brents, Brent Woods and Brent Fitz, way back in 2001. I was touring in a band called Load Point Pull from Kansas City at the time, and they were playing with Vince Neil. So I kept in touch with Fitz, especially for many years. And we've been friends for a very long time. And as far as how it kind of led to the whole thing with Bruce was, I'd kind of always bugged them a little bit because Todd and Brent are friends. And I was like, you ever need a keyboard player on all that 80s KISS stuff? You got one right here. And finally, it actually happened. So we were just kind of hanging out on the boat one day, or maybe we were on the beach. I don't even remember at this point. And Fitz was like, "Oh yeah, we were hanging on the boat. We were just kind of hanging in the merch area and stuff." He's like, "Hey, you should play keys on Reason to Live." I was like, "I'd love to," because, when I was a kid, one of the very first records, the first records I ever bought when I was like 4 years old was the Star Wars soundtrack, Sesame Street Sings, and Kiss's Love Gun album. My grandma got those three records for me when I was little. And then, but I didn't really, I loved that record, of course, when I was a kid, but I was a kid. I was very small. And then years later, when I was able to buy my own records, the first KISS record that I actually bought with my own money was Crazy Nights, and I wore that thing out. So to be able to play Crazy Nights and Turn on the Night, which are two of my very favorite KISS songs ever, actually, and Reason to Live with Bruce was pretty awesome. And we kind of played together for the first time at Creatures Fest here in Nashville last year, or not last year, this summer, I guess that's
Yeah.
and they were playing Sure Knows Something, and I'm like, I know this song. And I just kind of snuck up on the keyboards and played the keyboard parts on there. And I remember it's funny because they turn around and they're like, where's these keyboards coming from? And I was like, and as soon as it was over, I snuck off the stage. I didn't even tell them I was playing it. And then, and I actually didn't even meet Bruce at the Creatures Fest. I met him on the cruise because I'd been on the cruise 2 other times with a band called The Big Rock Show.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Oh, you were with Ryan and Jeremy and all the guys.
So I played with those guys. And those guys were my introduction to all things cruises. I mean, because KISS Cruise, Kid Rock Cruise, we even went on the Rob Gronkowski he had his own cruise. That was my very first one with those guys. And so ever since then, man, I've been on at least 2 cruises every single year since I've been living here. And so next year I'm on 6 of them.
Oh my goodness.
Nice.
Doing Dueling Pianos and doing with Vixen. We're on the 80s cruise. We're doing and then I do the Monsters of Rock cruise every year. And I do a show on that called Rare Hair, which I also do here in Nashville, where we get a bunch of musicians that tour together, like all these big guys, the guys that tour for all the big country acts, like Taylor Swift or Florida Georgia Line or whatever. And then all the guys that play down on Broadway here in Nashville, and then all the 80s rock stars that live here. And we all throw them in a club here together, and we play a bunch of deep cut 80s music. We've done Turn on the Night. We've done stuff like that, songs that nobody else is really covering, and it's a lot of fun. So we do that on the Monsters of Rock cruise every year too, and it's really, really fun. It's a lot like the All-Star Jam that we did with Lita Ford,
right? Except
there's just a ton of them. There's usually 120 musicians on the show, and it's really fun.
Love it.
So that's kind of the short version.
Both weeks. Were you in week 1 and week 2?
Yeah, I did both weeks. So I got called initially just for the All-Star Jam. And then actually initially Vixen was on it. Vixen was on week 2, and so I played for them. So I was like, okay, that's gonna be cool to be back on the KISS Cruise again. And then I got the call from Sixth Man asking if I would want to play keys with Brent Woods on the Lita Ford thing and the All-Star Jam stuff. And obviously the answer to that is of course. And it was cool because Vixen's played with Lita a bunch of times, and I'd always bug the band members. I was like, I want to play Kiss Me Deadly with Lita, and there was never really a time to do it. And then, so I finally got a chance to do that. That was really cool. We did, so I did 3 songs with her, and then we did the big super jam with guys from Warrant and LA Guns and all the different bands that were on there, and did a bunch of classic rock songs and stuff. And that was super cool. Fun. But the second week didn't really lend to keyboards much because, it was Sebastian Bach was the featured guest. No keyboards in Skid Row songs. They just weren't. So there just wasn't really a spot or an opportunity really for me to be part of that second week. But, man, if I'm being honest, by the second week, I was so tired from doing all the other things that I was doing. I was just like, that's totally fine. We just I just enjoyed watching the show and watching Sebastian perform, who sounded great, by the way. It's really crazy because I've seen that guy over the years many, many times, whether it was with Skid Row or whether it was as a solo artist. And he could be, that stuff is really challenging to sing. And it's like now he sounds better than he did. Like he sounded good way back in the day, but there was definitely a time period where he was like kind of hit and miss, like sometimes you see him like, oh man, he sounds, he's a little shaky, but he's okay. He sounds pretty good. And then there's times when it was like, oh man, that was pretty, kind of a pitchy type of show. But man, on the boat, both shows, he just completely delivered really, really well. I was impressed.
Big time.
It's funny because I heard about the Dueling Pianos on the ship through word of mouth, and I was told, oh, you guys got to go see this. It's incredible. To be honest, I had no idea what it was.
Right.
And when I got there, it's like, oh my God, what a party. For me, one of the highlights is, the after show events on the ship and the night. And yours for me was the second to last night. And I got to be honest, it was one of the highlights for me. What a party that was! Got together with friends. It was just what an incredible night that was because of you guys. Tell us
awesome.
more. Tell us more about the Dueling Pianos.
So we did 4 shows on the boat, okay? And so I do this for a living. That's kind of my main source of income. If I'm either playing in a band here in Nashville on Broadway, or I'm doing Dueling Pianos at a place called the Big Bang, which is located inside of a club called Whiskey Shot on 3rd Avenue here in Nashville. And I'm there usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. But I did a songwriting convention camp for the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp folks here in Nashville late spring this year. And it was a 6-man event. And so Trey was there. That's where I met him. And I told him, I was like, man, I do these Dueling Piano shows on the Monsters of Rock cruise and on a bunch of one of the other companies that puts on cruises. And I was like, I'd love to get in on some of the 6-man stuff too, because I think it'd go over really well. And so he said, yeah, let's try it sometime this summer. Maybe we can put you on KISS or something else. Great. So essentially what happened was he called me and asked, hey, when he called me about the jam, he was like, would you want to try the Dueling Pianos thing? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I just need to figure out who I'm going to do it with, because the biggest issue with dueling piano players, generally speaking, it's all request shows, right? So it doesn't matter if you bring up Britney Spears or if you bring up Slayer or if you bring up, it doesn't matter. You bring up whatever you want. And we know a lot of songs, obviously. And so the whole point of it is I wanted to find somebody that was a little older, because we're not playing, I was like, we're not going to be playing, Ariana Grande on the KISS Cruise. We're not going to play on all these pop hits that are current on the radio right now. We're going to be playing a lot of classic rock and stuff that's older, Styx and Kansas and Rush and whatever, stuff like that. And so I wanted to find somebody that was a KISS fan. And if I'm being honest, most dueling piano players don't go much deeper than Rock and Roll All Night in Detroit Rock City. They just don't. So I need to find somebody that, if somebody wants to hear, I don't know, just anything like that's deeper than that stuff, that they're going to be able to handle it. So there's a Dueling Pianos page on Facebook, and I put up a post that said, who among you are big KISS fans? And 2 people replied. And Cal, who I brought on the boat with me, he replied, KISS Army since 1974. I said, that's the guy. Wow. So I called the guy, and I was like, I kind of vetted him on the phone a little bit, and I asked him some questions about, because I'd seen him perform online during the pandemic. While everybody was shut down, a lot of musicians were streaming online, including myself. That's how I made a living for a year and a half. And I watched him play a couple times. I'm like, this guy's pretty good, but I don't know him at all. So I called him on the phone and just kind of got to know him a little bit and talked to him about KISS stuff, and just kind of saw where his head was at and kind of what his wheelhouse was musically and stuff. And he said, man, classic rock and all that kind of. I was like, you're going to be great on this. And I could tell just by talking to him that we were going to, because that was my biggest concern. I was like, man, I'm going to get some guy that smells bad and he's got a bad attitude or he's annoying or whatever. And I got to live with the guy on a boat for 2 weeks, and that's going to be terrible. But he was great. And he was, I literally had just met him at the airport before we got on the boat the day before. And we played together like we'd been playing together for years. And that was really cool.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey Tyson, you touched on the topic before about playing with Bruce Kulick and his band. So in other words, so what was the experience like, and was it planned, or how? When you got to the ship, did you know that you were going to be playing with Bruce?
No, I had no idea. I mean, like I said, I've known Todd and Brent for a long time. I know Zach, who played on the second week with Bruce, because I know Zach through, we did a thing on Shiprocked together earlier this year in January. He plays for Corey Taylor. I used to play for Corey, so there's that connection. And he's one of those guys kind of like Todd and Brent, once the Slash thing's over, he's playing with Bruce or he's playing with somebody else. He's always doing something. And I'm like, man, I want to be like you guys when I grow up. I want to be like, as soon as this gig's over, the next gig is ready to go. and you're always out working, and I admire those guys so much. But it really, yeah, I mean, I didn't have any idea. I learned the songs on the cruise. I kind of knew them already because I was a fan, obviously. Oh yeah, we did Forever too. And so like literally right before we went on, I made a chart for Forever. I had my headphones on and I was just writing it out and learned it right before we went on stage because I'd never really played it before. But I mean, again, I kind of had a pretty vague idea of how it went because I knew the song. I just had never played it. So here in Nashville, we have this system called the number system where we write charts based on the scale tones, and I'm gonna get a little bit technical or whatever.
Go for it.
But if you're like in a major scale, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? And each of those notes has a number, and so when I listen to a song, I can listen to a song and make a chart of it based on what I'm hearing in those scale tones, right? And so that's how I made a chart for Forever, as I was sitting back there with Bruce and everybody else, and I was ignoring everybody's conversation and just writing a chart out really quick. And then I got up and played the song. And so that's one of the cool things that I've learned here in this town of kind of how to make a chart. I've written lots of charts on planes right before I had to go to a gig to do a whole gig, just based on using my ear. Wow. And I think in a way there's some reliability factor when you have guys that can do stuff like that and you can come in and still play the song virtually as flawlessly as possible. And I thought it went pretty well. I mean, I watched the video back and I was like, okay, that was pretty good.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah, it was really a cool opportunity. I had just met Bruce. I mean, I met him a couple of years ago on the KISS Cruise as well, but it was very just, hi, nice to meet you. I didn't ever have a conversation with him. So when I arrived in LA the day before the cruise, I coincidentally sat with one of his friends on the plane on the Southwest flight from Vegas, because Vixen played in Vegas that Saturday. And so this lady I sat next to happened to be a friend of Bruce's and a bunch of folks in the KISS world, right? And so we got to talking and had a good conversation. When we got to LA, I was like, well, I got a few hours to kill before I got to go pick up Cal from the airport. So I'll just take you around and help you kind of get the stuff you need to do done in LA, and then I'll just take you to the hotel where you're staying at. And we pulled up to the hotel, and there was Brent Fitz, and I saw a bunch of other folks that I didn't really know from kind of like KISS crew guys and stuff like that. And then Bruce came in with his wife, and we all sat down and kind of had a good talk. And I told her, at one point I was like, I actually never connected with Bruce very past, hello. And so I'd like to get to know him a little bit better. And she said, well, you're going to have an opportunity this time to do it. And sure enough, I didn't know I was going to lead to me playing with the guy though. So that was a nice surprise. But yeah, it was what a cool guy and what a great history. And I love his era of KISS a lot because that was my childhood. That was my adolescence and what I grew up on and stuff like that.
Very cool.
That was a surprise for the KISS fans as well, seeing you come up on stage and play keyboards for those songs. It was it was really cool to see.
Yeah, well, it was cool to do as well.
yeah. So I want to spend the rest of this episode, talking KISS Cruise because it's still fresh in our minds. The excitement is still there. The high is still there. And I want to do a little review of the of KISS Cruise XI. So I want to start with the bands. Did you see some of the bands, and what are your favorites and why?
I try to make it a point to see just about everybody because before anything, I'm a music fan, that's why I do what I do. And there was an interesting dynamic between week 1 and week 2. It was very, very different. Did you guys both do both weeks, or did you only do one week?
No, we only did week 2. Yeah.
Okay, so week 1 and 2 were extremely different from each other. And the bands were, the vibe was just, I don't know. Week 1 wasn't as busy because it wasn't sold out. So it wasn't as crowded, and you didn't have to wait on the elevators as long. You didn't have to wait in lines as long because it was literally like there was probably 2,000 less people on that boat than there was on the one that you guys were on. Yeah. So it was actually really nice to kind of be able to breathe and do what we needed to do. And the bands as well, the vibe of the bands was a lot lighter. You had a lot of 80s vibe, Dokken, Warrant, George Lynch, LA Guns, that whole thing. We're all friends because we all play in the same bands, you know, in the same time period or whatever. So we all knew each other. So that's why that jam was like really fun, because we were all buddies. You know, we're all just getting up there playing deep, cool classic rock tunes and stuff like that. Whereas on the second week, it was like we're all friends too, but the music was heavier. Like Black Label Society's heavier, and obviously, and Buck Cherry is heavier. You know, bands like Riot is heavy as hell. You know, like, I mean, Stryper is an '80s band, so they kind of fit more along that kind of lighter vibe. But even like Sebastian Bach is like heavier than Lita Ford. You know what I mean? It's like everything was just heavier and not really darker, but kind of darker too. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, let's party. It's like, you know, some loud guitars, and it's just it was different. All the way around, but it was still cool, because I mean, I've been very fortunate that I've gotten to know like JD and Jeff and the guys in the Black Label are great, super great human beings. They're some of my favorite people in our world, if that makes sense. And the Buck Cherry guys are super nice guys too, all of them. Stryper guys I've been friends with for a long time. I love all of them. And but like if I'm going to like even the lesser known bands, that was really, really cool experience, because I'm like, man, there was a bunch of bands that I'd never heard of that were like really, really, like that Mickey James kid. I'd never heard of him, and I was like, who is this guy? He's incredible. He's really, really good. Plush, of course. I'd seen Plush with Slash, or last fall they had opened up for him, but I've been watching Mariah for 3 or 4 years now, because she was on American Idol or something like that, and then she kind of changed her look and her vibe, and was doing all these, like during the pandemic, she was doing these cover songs like Barracuda and Steelheart and all this stuff by herself. I'm like, who is this girl with this ridiculous voice? It was so incredible. And so it was good to see them on the boat, and I was hoping to get to know them and meet them all, but I mainly just kind of met her, and she's extraordinary. I'd never seen Riot before, and I saw that on the schedule. I was like, really? Is that like the real Riot, like the band? Because I when I was a kid, I had the Thunder Steel record, and I love that record. And sure enough, that was the band that, you know, like that's what they closed with. I was like, holy crap, they were so good. And nice guys too. Hung out with them a lot on the second week, and I had to look at the actual band lineup because I forget who all was on there. The other one that just completely floored me, even though I've seen him before, was watching Richie Kotzen in that small lounge. I was sitting kind of in the backstage area watching him, and it's like it's a religious experience watching that guy. And then I'm sitting there watching him just do what he does, which is absolutely extraordinary. And Paul Stanley and Eric come through like the right in front of me, and they're standing right next to me. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm watching the show with Paul and Eric now. That's cool. and so it's funny because I was showing Paul a picture of when the first time I ever met him, and he and Gene opened up a restaurant in Kansas City, the Rock and Brews restaurant in Kansas City, and they came to make an appearance. And so I met them that day. And literally after I shook Gene's hand and said hello, my wife texted me and said, I think my water just broke. And I was like, oh shit, Gene, I gotta go. And my son was born the next day, the one that just came in here and barged in. So the year later, Gene came back by himself, and I took another picture with him, and he put sunglasses on my son, and I showed Paul that picture too. And that was cool. But yeah, I mean, I love Richie. He just he's like an alien of a human being. I don't understand how he does what he does, but it's not commercial by any means. There's nothing that you're going to hear on the radio or anything like that. But when you listen to it and you watch you're there and you're experiencing it firsthand, to me anyway, it's like, it's transcending. It's just insane. And his whole band, like, it's just three guys, but it sounds gigantic.
Yeah.
And so that was probably my favorite performance of the whole thing, even though like I loved so many other things. LA Guns on the first week was the best I've seen them since like the 90s. The lineup they have now, they're on fire. They're great. Warrant is always great. I've seen them many times. We played with them a bunch, and those guys they're always awesome. I mean, there's never a time where you walk out of a Warrant show go, oh, that was okay. It's always like, yeah, that was really good. So
Yeah.
So, Tyson, thanks for the, it's a great insight that you were part of week 1 and week 2. So thanks for the review. This is great. So what do you think about KISS performance and the set list for both the Sail Away show and the indoor concert?
Yeah, it was awesome. And Paul's voice was in really good shape this time.
Yeah.
It was a little shakier on the second week than it was the first week, but it was he was still, I thought he sang really well. And I love that's one of the best parts about the KISS Cruise is they do songs that they don't do on their shows when they're on the road. It's like, oh man, because I remember I don't remember what year it was, a few years ago when they did like Tomorrow and Tonight and some of those really cool songs. I was like, holy crap, and they opened up with like I was like, this is ridiculous. So and this was not any different. There was a lot more hits this time around, at least in their indoor shows, than I expected, but they still sprinkled in some cool stuff no matter what. I love the Sail Away shows though. The first one that I ever saw, they were acoustic on the Sail Away. So this one I was expecting it to be acoustic as well, and I was surprised that it was an electric show, but it was still really cool. And I like how they are so loose, and they're not like, especially on the Sail Away shows, they're not like super rehearsed, and they just kind of go, well, we're just gonna throw and go this and see how it goes. And I love seeing that with a band like that who's just kind of notoriously known for everything being really well rehearsed and prepared
for the big production. Yeah, that's right.
And Tyson, what are your thoughts about the KISS related events? Like how quick can you kiss with Eric Singer, or Are You Smarter Than the Rock God? Did you see any of those?
Yeah, the Are You Smarter Than Rock God was hilarious.
Yeah.
Or at least the one that I saw was great. You have to have good contestants in order to make that a success and to make it funny.
Make it fun.
Yeah, and the one that I saw did have good contestants. It was really good. And then I watched, let's see, what was the other one that I watched? Oh, the Newlywed Game was really funny. That was really good. I'd seen Paul do his cooking thing before, so I kind of skipped that one, to be honest. But one that I really also liked a few years ago was when Gene did his bass lessons. Those were really cool.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that this time around, but the ones, let's see. It's always cool that Eric does the drum off thing and that Tommy does the guitar thing. I mean, it's great for the fans and the people to get some FaceTime, some personal time with those guys. I love that they're out there and about. One thing that surprised me more than anything is Paul was out there watching bands all the time, both weeks. Yeah. I'd never seen him out as much as I did this time around. He was really out watching bands, including ours. He came watch Vixen on our second show, and he was standing right next to me. No pressure. Like, damn, this is weird. So friggin' Paul and Doc were standing right next to me. Like literally, I could have if I did this, I would have slapped Paul in the face.
I love it. Did you have the chance, Tyson, to see the Q&A with and the trivia with KISS and Doc McGee?
I saw the yes, I did watch Doc's. I didn't see Paul's one-on-one, but I did see the whole band Q&A, both of them, and those are always a blast. I love those.
Yeah, that was.
Cool. The last Q&A I remember was the one where was a comedian, the Lopez, got pulled off the stage because he was being
Charles Lopez. Yeah.
That was hilarious.
Did you, Tyson? Did you participate at any of the end of the night's events on the KISS Cruise after everything is shut down, like at the casino or the karaoke, anything like that?
No, not really. I did so much participating in everything else that I just kind of took it easy at that point. And actually, a lot of times what happened was me and Cal would end up in the artist lounge playing with guys from Riot and some other guys until like
nice.
4 or 5 in the morning, just being idiots and just playing for. And there was one night we had so many people that security came and kicked everybody out except for the artists because they weren't supposed to be in there.
Oh, cool.
So that was funny. I did go to karaoke one time, but I'm like, man, I'm already singing enough. I ain't trying to get
right.
Yeah, you don't want to be there, of course not. Hey Tyson, just to wrap up, and before we go, we just wanted to thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be on longer. I don't really know a whole lot more than that I can think of, though, that I missed. I tried to touch on everything that I could think of.
No, basically we touched on everything. We just wanted to know what your overall remarks on the KISS Kruise XI are. So how would you rate this cruise compared to some of the previous ones? Or the 10th?
Man, let's see. I didn't do the 10th. I think I did 9 and 8, if I remember correctly. And I don't know, because that very first one you do is always just like, whoa, and, taking everything in, and it's always quite it's a bit of a shock at first, just trying to, like when Cal gets on the boat for the first time and he sees everything, and I'm like, and there's Eric and there's Tommy, and like everything's right there. It's always like, well, it's just sensory overload at first.
Yeah.
And but this one, like I said, I loved week 1. I had an absolute blast on week 1. Week 2, I also had a good time. It was just a little more stressful, especially since my own band was on there, Vixen. So that meant that I actually had to work as well. I loved getting to know Bruce and those guys a little better. Both all the guys that I already knew in the band, as well as Chaz, who played on the first week in place of Zach. What a great guy, great bass player, great singer. I didn't know Zach could sing like that, man. Zach's an amazing singer.
It's amazing.
He's awesome. And I also loved getting to know Brent Woods a little bit more, because he's a guy that I always thought he's kind of a stoic dude, and he's not the most, I don't know if talkative is the right word. I don't know. But every time I'd seen him, he in the past when we played with Sebastian, or whether I saw him with other things, we just never really connected too much before. And now I feel like, we're actually friends, or we could be friends. I mean, a great guy, great player, all that kind of stuff. And he did a good job at organizing the jams and stuff like that. Because, the jam was a result of what happened last year when Sebastian didn't make it on the boat.
Yeah.
So, and he's always been that guy. Brent's always been known for the guy that can kind of pull stuff together, because he knows a lot of people. And he's like me in that same regard. We both are good at putting that kind of stuff together. I do it here in Nashville. I do it on the Monsters of Rock cruise. He does it on a couple other cruises. So I think us two working together is a good thing. It was great to get to know the LA Guns guys. I actually never know them. That was a band that I've been a fan of for decades, but I never met them really, except for Ace Von Johnson, who was only because I knew him from Faster Pussycat. He was playing in that band before LA Guns. So it was really the cruises are one of the best networking experiences you can possibly have as a musician, because there's nowhere to go, because you're stuck on this thing for 5 days or 7 days or whatever it is. And you're eventually inevitably going to see the people that you want to meet or that you want to work with on a frequent basis. And so it's easy to put yourself in a position to strike up that conversation that you always wanted to have with whoever that might be. And obviously, it's a little more intimidating to strike up that conversation with a Paul Stanley than it is maybe somebody else, whatever. But it's still, as you kind of just know instinctively when the right time is to kind of move in and introduce yourself to some of these people. And when it's time to leave them alone. They're eating dinner, or they're knee deep in a conversation with 8 people or whatever it is. But every once in a while you find that one moment and you go, hey, my name's Tyson. I've been listening to you for years. I love what you do. And whatever that wherever that goes from there, whether it's, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's have lunch together, or whatever, anything like that kind of strengthens that bond with somebody that you didn't know before. I did that with Johnny Martin from LA Guns last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. And I found out we had so many things in common and a lot of common friends. And I found out that I really like that guy a lot, and that we'll probably be friends for a long time.
So Tyson, one final question before we let you go.
Sure.
We all heard the announcement of a KISS Cruise in 2024. And we saw your post on the KISS Cruisers page, asking fans to, get the Dueling Pianos back on the ship. So anything you would like to say to the fans right now?
Well, I'm excited. I hope I'm on it.
I think we all are.
I hope we get to do the Dueling Pianos shows again. I think that because of guys like you and the fans that have already told Six Man how well things went for us, I would be surprised if we weren't asked back. And we'd both love to do it again. The capacity of what they're doing and their plans with, the no makeup and kind of bringing in their solo bands and all that stuff, I think that's really intriguing. It'll be interesting to see how that translates into sales in terms of how many people decide to actually go on it, and not expect to see the full makeup shows and all that stuff. But I mean, for me, I almost think it's kind of cooler, I've seen the makeup shows a lot, and I've seen the kind of overplayed, I don't really need to see him play Strutter for the 2 billionth time, but I'd like to see Paul's soul band. I think that sounds cool. I love Gene's solo band. Those are my buddies, and they always play cool material in that band. They don't, obviously they play the hits too, but they really dig deep with that Gene Simmons solo band, and it's really cool.
That's right.
Yeah, and I loved what they were talking about, how Tommy Thayer plays with Robbie Krieger and some of these guys. I'm like, man, I'm bringing him. I want to see that. I want to see what that's all about. That's really cool. So I know those guys individually always have really interesting stuff going on. Like I've liked Eric Singer since the Badlands days. I've been, I was a huge fan of that band. I saw him with Alice Cooper. So I've always liked Eric too. And actually, Eric was one of the first guys. It was the first time I really kind of had a conversation with him and got to know him a little bit, not much, but a little bit. At least we know each other now. So that's pretty cool.
No, very nice. Tyson, thank you so much for being on the show and for giving your review of KISS Cruise XI. And it's nice to have this unique perspective from an artist on the ship rather than, one of us, a guest.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. I love, doing these kinds of things. So, anytime.
Thank you again. I'm going to second, what Pascal just said. It's been an honor to have you. And again, what a great show you put up. And your collaboration with all the musicians there during the cruise was exceptional. And we can thank you enough. And we hope to see you in January 2024.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good, man.
Thank you. So to the KISS Army, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, please send them to talktome@kissarmynationpodcast.com. Until the next episode, remember, never stop rocking. Take care, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Spotify, Automatic, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to make yourself heard. Leave us a comment on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. See you all soon, KISS Army.